It's time to get into it. What do we need to do with Jeff Sims?
You are Locked On Huskers, your daily podcast on the Nebraska Cornhuskers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey gang, DP here, Locked On Huskers. Thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Lot to talk about. We're going to stick with the offensive side of the ball today because we need to get some answers. And in order to get answers, you have to ask questions. Before we get into that, and you can see what's going on with what we're going to provide in this episode, Mark Ironweiler, won't you let them know about eBay Motors?
Thank you, DP. This episode of Locked On Huskers is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. DP, back to you.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Lots to go over through this thing that we call Locked On Huskers. Again, we'll pause so that you can go in and subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. We can bring this to you so you can get this content each and every day. It's Wednesday on a week that is beat Buffaloes, beat Colorado, whatever way you want to go through it. And before you get caught up in the hype that is Colorado football and Coach Prime and the offense that never ends and all of those things, I wanted to spend some time focusing on what has been and what was the situation with Nebraska's offense. Minnesota gave us some answers. It also gives us some questions throughout the course of this thing. We'll talk about Jeff Sims and what can be done, the Marcus Satterfield effect, and what can be done. Let's talk about the coaches and what can be done there. And then let's talk about how do you fix the things that can be fixable and the things that are required for you to beat Colorado on Saturday in Boulder. So we'll cover all of those things over the course of this episode. I wanted to start with Jeff Sims, and here's why. A lot of the conversation, as I said in a prior episode, a lot of the conversation during the game from Minnesota fans was how exceptional Jeff Sims was, how difficult he was to capture and to put to the ground. And, the Gopher fans had great frustration in not being able to tackle him and not being able to contain him. Him keeping their defense on the field with his feet. And then at the end of the game, of course, they exhaled because his arm ultimately failed him in what he was doing. And I don't know necessarily if it was his arm or whether it was what he was seeing or what he was thinking, but all of those things are in play. And to talk about Jeff Sims, you have to talk about the good that was done before you talk about the bad. So again, the numbers were incredible on the ground. His game management with the ball in his hand to run, Jeff Sims at times for 10 of the 19 carries that he had was the best player on the field. And I'll say that again because I need to be clear. There were half the running plays that took place with Jeff Sims keeping the rock. He was the best player on the field and had the most impact than anyone on the field. A lot of those runs were successful not because of the blocking or not because of the scheme, but because Jeff Sims was quite simply more athletic and more driven than everybody else on the field. And he was a problem. The numbers don't lie. 19 carries, 100-plus yards. I think that a couple of things are in play when you think about Jeff Sims before you get into the passing and the leadership. Now, the leadership was on point. Watching him on the bench and on the sideline, again, I was right literally behind the bench. And to see the communications that were going on during the game to get them to the point where they were, one, still connected to the game, down 3-0, then getting ahead 7-3 and 10-3. And then being in a situation in the fourth quarter with a lead. Everything looked as though it was going to end as we wanted it to, with Nebraska figuring out a way to leave Minneapolis with a win. And then the other part, right? Good Jeff Sims then introduced bad Jeff Sims. And it wasn't purposeful, but it's just a thing that happened. So you have to talk about it. And that's not to slander or slight Jeff Sims. Jeff Sims would tell you, I would imagine, don't want to speak for the young man, so don't let me do that. I would imagine that as a coach, a big thing in the conversation with Jeff Sims is, what did you see? What did you see on the field? What were you thinking in these situations? What was mission one? What was priority one? What was the first read? Did you have the ability? Was the throwing window open? Was the receiver on time? Was the receiver where you thought they were going to be? Were your mechanics good? Right? Was your footwork exceptional? Now, in the running game, his footwork was exceptional. But in the passing game, there were moments and there were times when, quite frankly, things went wonky. And it happens. And if you're not used to playing in a game of that speed, of that magnitude, and you haven't done it for 7 months, there's some things that have to be worked out. And I want to repeat that any quarterback that carries the ball 19 times in a game, not counting all the times that he was hit, pressured, sacked, otherwise, that he just ran the ball, the hits that are accumulated have an impact on a quarterback. The great value of a quarterback is not just standing in the pocket, statuesque, making throws. That's not it, and that's not how the game's being played currently. For Jeff Sims, he took, and I probably should do this, that on his 19 carries, I would need to count the hits that he took, and then on the dropbacks, how many hits he took. But that number is exceptional. That's a 30-plus number of being hit by Division I defenders. And that impacts the brain. That impacts the body. The muscles take a beating. The throwing arm can be hit. All of those things in play. And it may, again, pace of game has impact. Now, I won't justify him throwing 3 interceptions. 2 of the interceptions, there's no question about, well, there was another read and there was another progression that could have taken him through. And then the other one, sometimes things take effect. Sometimes people get at your feet and make it difficult for you to use your natural throwing motion. But in those situations and cases, what you want from a quarterback is to not try to force a thing to fit that will not fit. If you are pressured and you cannot go through your normal throwing motion, throw it away and let's restart. Do not press it and throw it away and give the ball away. There's no situation other than 4th down that requires that you simply accept things as they are and make a throw that doesn't benefit you and that you don't feel comfortable in making. Jeff Sims, again, for several plays, was the best player on the field, especially for Nebraska, but often in the game, whether it was Nebraska and Minnesota. For 10 plays, he was exceptional with the ball in his hand. There were several of the 19 dropbacks of the, that we can talk about where he got pressured. 10 of those, he delivered the ball on time with great throws. Now, you're not always judged by the things you do well. Sometimes you're judged by the things you don't do well, and that is the end result when you don't get a win in Minneapolis in a game that you led for the majority of the game, especially leading by a score in the 4th quarter with the ball in your possession. And I want to repeat that. Leading the game on the road in the 4th quarter with the ball in your possession. That checks all the boxes that are required for something good to happen. It also checks all the boxes for why you limit what you do in those situations. One of the questions that I need to talk about in the next segment is this. Where was the running game that did not involve Jeff Sims? What happened to it? And what has to happen? How important is it for this team to get that stuff fixed so they can win in Boulder, Colorado? This is Locked On Huskers. We'll be right back. Hey, gang, DP. Whoop. Thank you very much for hanging out with me on a Wednesday. Again, it's beat the Buffaloes week. Beat Colorado. We want to thank the folks from here. Yep. Pay attention for all the Huskers content, your Huskers, each and every day here on Locked On Huskers. We're talking about Jeff Sims and the running game and the passing game and the changes. What's next for him is film study at the highest level over situation and circumstance. When in the room with a quarterback, especially a quarterback that's a playmaker and a quarterback that will absolutely determine your production and the outcome of the game. We now know that Jeff Sims is that important to Nebraska's offense. That's how points are going to be scored. And again, with a quarterback running for 100 yards and you only scored one touchdown, that leads to other questions. But I think we can feel pretty confident that Jeff Sims will be able to move this offense with his feet. Feel pretty good about that. And why is that important? Because the Colorado Buffalo defense that we saw on Saturday against TCU wasn't very good against the run. Now, my concern is that, for the sake of a win versus a win, it's one game. You need to beat Colorado before you worry about anybody else, right? That's how this works. And the importance of getting a win in Boulder, Colorado in a rivalry game that brings back the memories of both of these programs being at the top level of college football. And then the pressure and the things that were put in play by Deion Sanders and their Buffalo's performance on Saturday. But in order to have success against this Buffalo's defense, and we're speaking about the running game, is that one, the line play. It all starts with the line play. It always will start with the line play. There were some injuries that were in play, some folks that limped off the field. Teddy Prohaska was in uniform, but didn't play. And Henry Lutovsky, who got some interval work. He was being rotated with Ethan Piper and Nori, but he was getting work, and then he was injured. That leaves a lot of pressure on Bryce Benhart and Turner Corcoran. Like we have to fully acknowledge that. And Husker fans have great familiarity with those two names. Ben Scott in the middle, Nori back at right tackle, Ethan Piper left tackle. At least that's how you start, how you maneuver and manipulate within the course of the game. Is up to game and situation and, quite frankly, production. But high altitude on an early Saturday, these linemen are going to have their work cut out for them. And I want to put all the pressure fully on the offensive line. This game's outcome will rest 100%, 100% on Nebraska's ability to run the football, traditionally run the football. And even if you throw it back to old-fashioned running the football, where you get some triple option in or some option in this thing, let it happen. It needs to happen. And the beauty behind it all is that this offensive line will have the ability to impact the game fully by controlling the front for Colorado. TCU had great success in attacking Colorado on the ground. And my question to Husker alumni who I was talking to during the game was, why wouldn't TCU just commit to leaning on Colorado? Just lean on them. Allow the run game beat. Like, there's a phrase that we use in coaching, commitment to execution. That everybody has a plan and everybody practices that plan. But often what comes into question is the commitment to executing that plan all the way to completion. And they had 200-plus yards rushing and had success and over 7 yards a carry, but wouldn't commit to it enough to keep that Colorado offense off the field. And then to stay committed to it over the course of 4 quarters, which is vital. And Nebraska has an offensive line that, quite frankly, Nebraska fans want to love. They want to love this offensive line. They want to feel committed. They want to feel confident. They want to feel protected. But we saw that there were moments where that doesn't happen. And there were certain times when, adjustments needed to be made, communications needed to be had, and it wasn't done. But it's much simpler to communicate on the offensive line if it's in the run game, if you commit to the run game. And the question will be whether Marcus Satterfield and the Husker offense is fully committed to executing the run game, a traditional run game, where they allow the offensive line to get into a rhythm and to get some flow and to have the running backs to get enough touches and be in enough situations where they can get positive yards. To lean on the Buffalo front seven just enough for this wear and tear. And again, it's really hard for Shedeur Sanders to have offensive success if he's standing on the sideline next to his dad. The importance of this thing, and you can use the short passing game as a part of the offensive game management and time of possession tool. But that requires that, quite frankly, you protect Jeff Sims enough that he can make quick throws, get the ball out of his hands, and can the receivers. Again, you're down a week. You're down a receiver this week. Isaiah Garcia-Castaneda will not play. He's out for the season. So now it would probably imagine that Marcus Washington is back, right? So he's back. Billy Kemp IV, Alex Bullock, those are folks. And then you got to look beyond that. And you've got to start to look at those receivers, those young receivers. And the name that pops out the most is Malachi Coleman. Top recruit, top talent, top speed, looks the part. And I can tell you for local folks who watched Malachi in high school, his body has changed in the last 4 months. He's starting to get his grown man on. For you folks outside of the circle and outside of Nebraska, I want to tell you, Malachi Coleman is starting to look physically. He's starting to look and he's starting to move like a Division I elite receiver. And again, it doesn't matter if you're just doing it in the pregame. You got to do it in when the lights are on and the clock's running. But from all presence, like the presence of the young man, his athletic arrogance is growing and his confidence is growing. Now, I don't know how it translates into game situation, but being down a receiver certainly opens the door for Malachi Coleman to get an opportunity to get out there. And look, having a long vert guy that's also not doubling as a quarterback or a defensive back would be helpful to Nebraska's offense and Marcus Satterfield. At some point, you've got to trust these sprinters turn football players or these receivers that run fast into actual pass catchers. It is an important thing. The running game will matter because it will open all that up. And what you need to do is just hope. Decoy, decoy, decoy. Okay, let's take a shot. And to have a playmaker actually do that and make plays. But it'll all come down to, will the traditional running game work? Will it keep Colorado's offense on the sideline? And in order to do that, we have to talk about 3 young men who have to have an exceptional day in Boulder, Colorado. We'll talk about those 3 players when we come back to Locked On Huskers. Hey, gang, again, it's been a good one and it's an exciting week. I mean, go figure that for all of the games in college football, ESPN does a really good job of tracking ticket value for the games, that if we had said 2 weeks ago that Nebraska versus Colorado would be the priciest cheap ticket in all of college football on a week where Texas travels to Alabama and Notre Dame is on the road to Tobacco Road, I would laugh in your face. But guess what? Twice the value, the cheapest ticket to get into Boulder, Colorado on Saturday is twice the price of Alabama versus Texas. Twice the price. The cheapest ticket is $369. The cheapest ticket in the building. So you've built some excitement about this thing. Deion and the Buffalo offensive performance, their ability to finish the game, Deion and all of his swagger and confidence, and then some star players all around. And we'll talk about those star players tomorrow. We'll go through that full Buffalo's roster because they got some dudes. And the coaching staff also matters. We'll talk about that as well. But to close this out, I wanted to talk about that in a game that matters, matchups matter. As they say, matchups make the fight. Well, the thing that we know that Nebraska can do is run the ball. Now, in game 1, under this roster, under this regime, it was Jeff Sims. But Gabe Ervin started the game and almost averaged 8 yards a carry. He didn't have enough touches. That was the problem. He didn't have enough carries. And I don't have an explanation for it. I don't understand it. 7 carries, 55 yards. You know, there were some opportunities where sitting behind the bench and you saw the offensive coach, hey, man, keep eating. Well, you got to feed me. You can't just go snatch the ball from Jeff Sims. You got to call plays for him. And to have Anthony Grant get some rhythm and then put him in a situation that not only proved costly, but was the reason why he wasn't your starter. He was putting the ball on the ground. So the most critical of drives, go for ball security. And then Ramir Johnson, who flashed and showed us once again that he's a playmaker. 63 yards on a kickoff return that literally turned the tide of the game and gave the momentum to Nebraska. They then went and scored, and then the Swiss Army knife is supposed to be able to run the ball off tackle, to be able to run the ball up the middle, should be able to catch passes out of the backfield. And this is how game management will work for Nebraska. Those three players, along with Jeff Simmons, those four players have to be absolutely 100% the best backfield in the game. And that's a huge task. That is a big get. But here's the thing. Colorado is a big hitter team. They can score from anywhere on the field and stretch it out. Yeah, there's a lot of work for Tony White to do to figure out how to defend this offense that Colorado is going to have. But Nebraska has a chance to keep them with their hands in the pockets, standing on the sideline with headsets on, instead of on the field putting points on the board, or at least trying to. As the shirts say, all over Nebraska. They're sold in stores and they're all over the internet. If Nebraska wants to win, they need to honor those three words. Actually, it's 4 words. My bad. Run the damn ball. And do it with some success and some continuity. Be consistent in it, and then be productive. Let's figure it out. But at the top of the list, along with not turning the ball over and no senseless penalties, Nebraska, in order to beat Colorado, has to run the damn ball. I'm DP. Thanks for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. We'll close with the 3 words we love so much. Say it with me. Go Big Red.